Hi there. Welcome back to Brian Keene's Secret Histories. I am, of course, Brian Keene, and today we're going to be talking about the book spread out before me here on the floor in my office. And that book, most of you will know as Dark Hollow, and some of you very long-time readers will know as the Rutting season. So let's get into why the title change, why this was my last title change, and the history of what is absolutely, without a doubt, one of my favorite of my works that I've written. It's probably also one of my most deeply personal novels. And it, of course, starts the Lahorn's Hollow mythos, which is such a big part of my overall fictional mythos, Labyrinth mythos. So let's get into all that. Let's get Dark Hollow out of the way, because first we're going to talk about this edition. This is the novel in its original form, under its original title. I wanted to call it The Rutting Season. This was published in 2006. I believe it was 2006. Let's double check that. This edition, signed limited edition hardcover, was published by Bloodletting Books. 400 signed and numbered hardcovers, 26 lettered editions. Yeah, Bloodletting Press, BLP. They were great. Larry Roberts, the great Larry Roberts, published just some gorgeous books and worked with some of the biggest names from our generation and the generation that preceded us. So yeah, this was published in 2006. Bloodletting also did a trade paperback edition, which oddly enough, on the secondary market, this seems to be more rare than the hardcover. I seldom see this pop up, but I see the hardcover pop up all the time. They also did what is absolutely one of my favorite of my lettered editions. That is a metal tray case. If you go back and watch the videos for Terminal or Take the Long Way Home, you'll be familiar with this setup. But in this case, we have the Pow Wow Magic Cipher, which we will get into here in a moment. And then that slides off the book, and you have the pipes of Pan here. These are actual functioning pipes. I can't pick it up and play a song for you right now because I'm recording, but the metal tray case opens up. Beautiful material on the inside, and here is in fact the lettered edition. Let's use the bookmark to pull him out. As you can see, it's very similar to the limited edition, but there are different end papers. The signature sheet is the same, but there are different end papers. There is, of course, a bookmark, and without the dust jacket, the lettered edition is composed of red leather. So just a gorgeous, gorgeous collector's item. If you ever see one pop up on the secondary market and you have the financial means, and it will take some financial means, but I recommend picking one up because they are just so cool, and they're cool to play with. So let's talk about what went into this book, and then we'll get to its new edition, Dark Hollow, because those two things go together. As I said, this was a deeply personal book for me. I will try to avoid spoilers, as I have done throughout this series of videos. But to talk about this one, there may in fact be some spoilers that creep in, and I apologize for that if you haven't yet read the book. But shame on you if you haven't, because this, like I said, this is one of my favorites. The main protagonist in this book is Adam Senft, and he tells the book in first person. Adam Senft is in fact me. It's probably him, in addition to Timmy from Ghoul, are probably the two truest characters I've ever written, because they are in fact versions of me. Now, we've talked about how there was a little bit of me in Jim in The Rising. We've talked about how there was a little bit of me in Tommy in Terminal. There's a little bit of me in all my characters. My wife, author Mary San Giovanni, would tell you that there's about 98% of me in the character of Tony Genova from the Clicker series and the Labyrinth series, etc. But I will argue that when it comes to Adam Senft, it's 100% me. The book is told from his voice, from his point of view, and it is my voice and my point of view. Adam is a novelist who has suddenly, finally found success. And that success is overwhelming. The financial part of that success has not yet come for him, but the fame is beginning to come. The notoriety is beginning to come. And he's finally able to quit his day job. In truth, he really doesn't have a choice but to quit his day job because the fame and the notoriety are causing problems there. And so he's in this weird sort of limbo where he's a full-time writer, but he's not making a full-time living off of it yet. He knows that that's coming when the next royalty check comes, but that royalty check hasn't shown up yet, and that is 100% where I was in my career. We'd had The Rising, we'd had City of the Dead. I was successful. I was a little too successful here in small town Pennsylvania because everybody knew who I was. Everybody knew what I was doing. At that point, people were beginning to show up at the house. Probably the most egregious example of this is Cassandra and I had a party. This was right before the paperback publications of City of the Dead and Terminal. And we're having a party. Wait, no, you know what? It was the hardcovers of City of the Dead and Terminal had come out. The paperbacks had not yet. Yeah. So we're all out in the backyard at our house. And, there's maybe 30, 35 people, all of whom we know. Okay. Cassandra goes into the house, Cassandra being my wife at the time. And she goes in to get some drinks. And there's 3 teenagers sitting at our kitchen table. And they say, "Hi, who are you?" And she says, "I'm Cassandra. I live here. Who the hell are you? What are you doing in our house?" And they said, "Oh, we're fans of Brian's. We thought maybe he'd sign our books." And they had copies of the paperback of The Rising. They had copies of Fear Gravity, if I remember correctly. And I think one of them had a hardcover of Terminal. And so she came out and she said, "There are 3 strangers sitting in our kitchen. How the fuck do they know where we live? What are you going to do about this?" I'm like, "What do they want?" "They want you to sign books." I did. And I very nicely explained to them, "Hey, guys, this isn't cool. You can't be doing this. Please don't tell other people where I live." But it's not the only time that happened. And it led to me basically having to leave my job. I was working, at that point after Conquer Worms, I had gone down to a part-time job. I would work 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then I'd come home and write. And that job was at FedEx. I'd work on their loading docks from 4 in the morning until 8 in the morning. And the notoriety was starting to catch up there. People would, it could be, mild stuff like, "Hey, you should put me in your next book and you should write about this." And, but there was also shit like, "You must have Stephen King money. You need to lend me some." So I really had no choice but to just go full time and make the most of it. All of that is what Adam is going through when this book begins. Something else the public didn't know is that Cassandra and I were having trouble conceiving. Um, there is a lot of personal stuff in this novel from Adam's point of view about that. And regretfully, all of that was based on real life too. I've often made the joke in interviews and stuff that writing fiction is cheaper than therapy, and it's true. Um, and sometimes I believe, and I say this as somebody who has experienced talk therapy, I believe that sometimes writing can actually be more therapeutic in the shorter term, not long term, but shorter term it can. It's not going to help you with something like CPTSD, but if there's one particular thing you're struggling with, I think writing can very much help. Writing this novel helped me. And over the years, since 2006, I have heard from so many readers who are also having problems conceiving, problems carrying children to term, who've told me that this novel helped them. And that's wonderful. That is an unexpected bonus of doing this for a living. The problem is, while it may have helped me and it may have helped complete strangers, it did not help my marriage. I put too much in this novel. Adam was too much of me. And that might have been survivable if it had just stuck to this edition. But of course it didn't. Because this edition came out, and we're going to come back to this. We're going to put a pin in the cost, okay? Let's talk about this edition. At this point, I was on a book-by-book contract with Leisure Books. Starting with Dark Hollow, I went to a 2-book-a-year contract, meaning they paid me for this book, and they paid me in advance for the next book, which I hadn't even written yet, which we will get to that book, in fact, being Ghoul. We changed the title from the Rutting season. And again, it was the argument that Walmart and certain bookstores aren't going to carry the book if it's called the Rutting season. Now, look, I get that they weren't going to carry that cover, okay? But I think the title would have been okay. I doubt the average person shopping at Walmart even knew what the word Rutting meant. But I allowed it. But I also said this is the last time. And it was the last time. From here on out in my career, and I've written a lot of books, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get to them all eventually. But this was the last time I let somebody fuck with one of my titles. I'm okay with this title. In fact, in truth, with the benefit of hindsight and the wisdom that comes with that, I think this is the better title. But it was the last time. I took far more creative control. I took pretty much 100% creative control after this. Because I was successful enough and making enough money for other people that I was allowed to do that. We'll let the temperamental artist have control over his titles and stuff because he's making us a lot of money, is what it boils down to. This book did very, very well. It came out, and I think The Rising was in its 5th or 6th printing. City of the Dead was in its 2nd or 3rd. Conquer Worms was in its 2nd. And then this came out. And all of them started selling well again. And this sold extremely well. Rue Morgue magazine, my friend Monica Kubler did a big feature-length article on the book and on me. Fangoria picked it up and ran with it. And the outside press really went with this one too. I remember CNN did a big thing on it, and others. The book was a big hit. And it exposed me to readers who were not inclined to pick up a book with giant earthworms on the cover or two novels about zombies. Um, this exposed me to middle America who enjoyed, Stephen King novels or Dean Koontz novels, but weren't exactly reading Layman or Ketchum. You know what I mean? This was the book that got me in front of them. And as I said, I had put too much of myself and too much of our losses into that book. I thought at the time, well, it's fiction. No one will know. But my wife knew, and that was incredibly hurtful to her. And that was 2006. Here we are in 2025, and I still feel very guilty about it. Now, she remains one of my best friends, my ex-wife. I talk to her every day. We get along great. She has forgiven me 500 times over for that, but I have never forgiven myself. So if you are a writer and you're watching this, that's a little bit of advice I would pass on to you. Yes, we bleed on the page. Yes, we use real life for our fiction. All writers do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you do need to be mindful of the truths you're telling and the pain you're sharing, because they may not be yours alone to tell and to share. Those truths and pains may be shared by others, and they should absolutely have a say in whether that's out there into the world or not. I feel like a criminal sitting in the interrogation room confessing to the cops right now for this. This is not something I've ever written about in nonfiction. I never talked about it on the Horror Show with Brian Keene podcast. I suppose I have hinted at it in places, but never this blunt, never this blatant. But that's what Secret Histories is all about. This novel earned me a lot, but it also cost me a lot. It helped a lot of people, but it also hurt some people. I have so much history tied up in this book, and yet it does remain one of my favorite things that I've ever written. Yeah, I guess history-wise, that's all we need to talk about. No, that's not true. Of course, we need to talk about Lahorn's Hollow. So I did know that Lahorn's Hollow was going to be a huge part of my mythos. I knew it would tie into the labyrinth somehow. I wasn't sure how. I wasn't thinking in terms of Ob and Behemoth and Leviathan. I knew all that stuff was connected, but I thought that this would be more grounded at first. It is based on Raymeyer's Hollow, which is a real place here in central Pennsylvania. Raymeyer's Hollow has a fascinating history all on its own. I've written about it in one of the Hail Satan books. I think it's Running with the Devil, which we're going to get to here in a few short videos. Raymeyer's Hollow has all kinds of legends, supernatural legends, UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings, devil dog sightings. It was also the home of an actual powwow warlock named Nelson Raymeyer, who was murdered for his copy of The Long Lost Friend back in the 1930s. Heavily fictionalized for this book. And of course, it's set in the 1980s and the 2000s. Those are the two eras that this novel takes place. But the local legends surrounding Raymeyer's Hollow, I wanted to do something similar for Lahorn's Hollow. I wanted this rustic rural area where, all the locals had stories about it and all of them had heard about it. But I wanted to fictionalize everything and make it my own. So that's where that came from. Levi Stoltzfus, of course, does not appear in this book. He appears in Ghost Walk, which is an unexpected sequel to this novel. And I say unexpected because I had no idea when I finished this book that I would return to to Lahorn's Hollow in that way. I knew there would be short stories. There had already been short stories. Redwood, which appears in Fear of Gravity, which we've already covered, precedes this novel. So I knew there were other tales to be told, but I didn't know about Ghost Walk. And I didn't know about Levi. And I did not know that Adam Senft would make a return after the end of this novel. And of course he does in Ghost Walk. But we'll probably save all that talk for when we actually get to Ghost Walk. Couple more things here. This is the Deadite Press edition of Dark Hollow. Of all my Deadite covers, this is my favorite. People often ask, which is your favorite? It's this one. Love, love, love that cover. Surprisingly, there have never been a lot of foreign language translations of this book. This is the German translation. There was supposed to be a Russian translation. In fact, I have mock-ups of the cover art here somewhere in my office, and I remember looking at galleys for them, but it never quite came to pass. And that's the thing with filming these videos live, because now, was this it? Okay, no. That is, in fact, Ghoul. That's the Russian edition of Ghoul. Yeah, Dark Hollow was supposed to follow after this. It did not. But this German edition, I love that cover. Let's zoom in on that. And of course, in Germany, Dark Hollow is called Der Satyr. So, that's everything you ever wanted to know about Dark Hollow, a.k.a. the Rutting season. Coming up next, it's The Rising, selected scenes from the end of the world. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Peace.